Hello again, Trekkies. Welcome back to Best of Trek, Worst of Trek. I'm your host, Dustin Wing. Dealing with climate change at 517, subspace environmentalists, or force of nature. In an episode where the main plot doesn't kick in till a third of the way through the runtime, and its message about warp causing irreparable harm to subspace that we'll never truly acknowledge again. This episode is only this high because it gets points for at least trying to make an episode that's an analogy to climate change. Otherwise, it's the Geordi and Data show talking about all the reasons Geordi ultimately shouldn't get a cat. And the first time the show refers to Spot as a she. And Geordi's obsession at keeping his engines running just a little smoother than the other engineers in the fleet. While searching for a missing Federation vessel, the Enterprise is ambushed in a corridor in space that's a major shipping lane, and a race that lives in the corridor doesn't want ships traveling at warp. So a scientist that figures it out martyrs herself by exploding a warp core, and causes some kind of tear in subspace where warp travel is impossible, and it begins affecting her own planet, that she sought to protect. The motivations don't line up, and martyrdom isn't the best way to get your point across. Mostly taking a side quest from the Xindi season arc at number 516, Hijacked, or Chosen Realm. Here's an episode where the ending is superb, and Archer says just enough to make this feel like it was a better message than the rest of the runtime would indicate. Enterprise helps a transport vessel of cultists, led by a dude named Dijon Mustard, or Dijamont or something, that end up taking over Enterprise in their holy war. The difference between the sides in this war are people that believe it took 9 days, and other people that believe it took 10 days to create their world. Yeah, ridiculous religious beliefs. And then deleting all data Enterprise has gathered on the spheres because it's part of these people's holy beliefs is also not cool. It's a better retread of let this be your last battlefield, and that's the best compliment I can pay this one. Shrieking like a dog at 5:15? Daddy issues. Or suddenly human. I'd say this is a great premise, executed poorly, that could have been done in half the runtime. The Enterprise rescues a bunch of young Talarians, and they find a human boy among them that was adopted when the Talarians killed his parents, and it gets Picard caught in a custody battle that could take the Federation to war with the Talarians, just to keep a human boy that wants to go back with them anyway. Picard decides in the end to let Jono do what he wants and go home. Though if we look at this through the eyes of modern DHS, it seems this kid will end up possibly mistreated in the end. But if he isn't returned, there's war, and a lot of people will die and be mistreated. Kobayashi Maru. No-win scenario. If you can get through a terrible first half, the second half of the runtime is quite decent Trek. Forced to be a father at 514, responsibilities. Or New Ground. This is a perfectly mediocre episode of Trek where Worf is forced to be a father when his stepmom informs him they're too old to take care of his responsibilities, and she's leaving Alexander on Enterprise. Worf begins the long-running arc of him being a terrible father, while the main plot involves a new method of space travel where a ship rides on a wave at warp speeds. Problem is, it gets out of control and is headed for another inhabited planet, so Enterprise needs to go through it and stop it. In the end, the A-plot meets the B-plot. Worf and Riker have to save Alexander and some endangered puppet life forms, and everybody's safe. There's a bunch of sciencey stuff wrong with this one, like laws of conservation of energy, though generally watchable. Screwing around on a comet at 513? Snowman. Or breaking the ice. Enterprise detects the biggest comet known to humans or Vulcans with a rare theoretical element. A Vulcan ship comes to watch Archer's studies of the comet, while Reed and Mayweather build and blow up a snowman. before becoming trapped in the comet, and Archer has to begrudgingly ask the Vulcans for help saving his crew. The only way I can describe this episode is weird. It doesn't feel good or bad, and near the third of the way up the list is where that feeling shakes out. Going on a holy crusade at 512, The Grail, or The Sword of Kalas. An episode that could be better if it didn't spend half the runtime meandering through a cave and turning protagonists against each other. Our favorite recurring Klingon, Kor, shows up knowing the location of the Sword of Kalas in the Gamma Quadrant. He, Worf, and Jadzia have a misadventure, the first half of which is fairly interesting. Up till they find the sword and leave it randomly floating in the Gamma Quadrant. You can never tell if the artifact actually has some magical draw to incite people against each other, or if it's really the natural proclivity of Klingons to fight over how much honor is worth. This is a waste of Kor. Gliding into 511, When Hokey Works, or Concerning Flight. This episode has too many plot holes in it to name, but it somehow works in the end. And that somehow is named John Rhys Davies. He just sells the Da Vinci character so well that you can only fault this one so much. Raiders beam objects, including the Doctor's mobile emitter and the Da Vinci character from holodeck memory, and then couple them together, giving this inventor a life of his own. Janeway ends up getting the main computer and other components back in Misadventures with Da Vinci. Tuvok is wearing the same outfit he does in his appearance in DS9's Mirror Universe. Playing football at 510, Obsolescence, or Fortunate Son. Enterprise turns around to answer a distress call from the freighter Fortunate. Apparently they've been attacked by Nausicaans and taken one as prisoner to make a point or something. The first officer as acting captain goes rogue, and it's just interesting enough of a plot to keep you watching, before Archer makes a deal to get the Nausicaans to leave them alone. The speech from Fortunate's captain to Archer after he recovers is really nice, and is as good as it gets in this Enterprise's Season 1 of mediocrity. Taking hostages at 509, Pa Wraith Keiko, or The Assignment. Keiko comes home from her latest stint on Bajor with a slight Pa Wraith infection. She orders Miles to reconfigure station systems to kill the Prophets, and in a gif I could watch on repeat all day, zaps and kills the Pa Wraith inside herself instead. Some story development of the series arc involving Prophets versus Pa Wraiths, where Keiko jumping from the walkway is the most satisfying thing in the episode. Requiring revenge at 508, Snowflake Death, or Silicon Avatar. Riker almost seems like he's ready to settle down on a new colony about to be established with one of the planners, a lady we just met, and gets sucked up into the crystalline entity. We're supposed to feel bad for Riker, but I don't know her well enough to care. It's the same entity that destroyed all life on Data's creation planet, and almost destroyed the Enterprise in Season 1. While initially suspicious of Data, an expert on the crystalline entity comes aboard, and is later impressed with the fact that Data has her son's brain pattern scans and journals from Omicron Theta. In the end, she disobeys Picard's orders and locks the controls to a beam they've set up to talk to the entity, and destroys it through frequencies. Despite its destructive nature, Picard regrets they had to destroy a possibly sentient space being rather than get a chance to communicate and study it. Her slow collapse into psychosis in the end is simultaneously satisfying and ridiculous. Stuck in Purgatory at 507, Klingon Hell, or Barge of the Dead. This is an episode I feel should have won an Emmy for lighting or VFX, because the set design and lighting are pretty much perfect. That being said, the episode itself is pretty decent for one exploring Klingon religion. The biggest problem is that at the end, B'Elanna's final conversation with her mother give the audience the impression that the entire episode never explored the Klingon afterlife, and this has all been in B'Elanna's mind. I can't stand media that never really happened in the end. B'Elanna has a near-death experience and finds herself in Klingon purgatory known as the Barge of the Dead. She finds her mother also on board being taken to Klingon hell for B'Elanna's lack of honor. She fakes her death again later to trade places with her mom in hell, but is fine by the end. A good watch that could have been better considering the amount of time and prep the episode took.
Ah, computer.
That program is available.
Thanks, Major. Thanks, Major.
Comlink enabled.
Thanks, Major.
Levels are unchanged.
Major.
Power conversion levels are at 97.2%.
Thanks, Major.
Calisthenics program of Lieutenant Worf.
Thanks, Major.
Life form is identified as Alexander Roshenko.
Thanks, Major.
Alexander Roshenko is on holodeck 4. The Alba Ra, a contemporary Talarian musical form.
Thanks, Major.
Transluminal processing at 575 trillion calculations per nanosecond. That procedure is not recommended.
Thanks, Major.